why do we struggle with just letting some things go?
I think because we tie some of our identity to how hard we work. I think that we get taught from a very early age, work hard. And if you attach your identity to how hard you work, then hiring somebody to do your taxes and your social media feels like a luxury and feels like you're not actually working hard anymore.
Yeah.
Because if you just took 20 hours a week off my plate, then what am I supposed to do with that time?
Good morning and welcome to a new edition of City on a Hill. I'm Whitney Mendoza, your host, and today joining me is Nikki Evans. She is CEO of Ridgeline Coaching. And you know what we're going to talk about today? Behaviors. So that you can go throughout your day and analyze everyone you come in contact with. Just kidding, but a little bit really. Actually, this is super interesting. I really enjoy talking about this subject. I think it's so pertinent. It's one of those things, if it could be more relevant today than it's ever been, it certainly is, right? Since we've got like a new workplace and hybrid work and all these different things going on. So welcome, Nikki.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So let's start off and just tell everyone a little bit of background of your story.
Sure. So I started out with a psychology degree, but I didn't want to do any of the things that you could do with a psychology degree. I asked my professors, and none of those things sounded interesting. Coaching was not a thing that many years ago, so or it was just starting, was not introduced to me. So I had friends that did a technology startup, so I said, fine, I'll do that. And I learned to do application development, and then I went on to a whole bunch of different roles doing that.
Startups are always fun, and you do wear a lot of hats.
You do.
In a startup.
So I went from that to that company got acquired, and it was a little bit bigger of a consulting company, and I did some travel with that, and then I ended up at a Fortune 500 company running a technology department. And so I saw a lot of people's stuff going on, and I actually had one employee come to me and say, I had assigned her a project and she didn't want to do it. And I said, but I need you to do it. And so she went to one of my peers and tried to get him to assign somebody. I was like, no, I need you to do it. She went to one of her peers and I said, no, I need you to do it.
Oh, wow.
And so I said, well, come and talk to me. Like, what's going on? I don't understand why you don't. It seemed like a no-brainer project to me. I didn't understand why she didn't want to do it. So we sat down, we had this conversation. She left my office kind of excited about doing the project. And I was like, what was that? I want to do that all the time. Is that just being a good leader? Did I just figure out that was being a good leader? And fortunately for me, her superpower was recognizing what other people are good at and telling them. And so she came back to me and she said, that was a coaching conversation. You're really good at it. You should look into it. And so I did and became certified as a coach and kind of did that on the sidelines for a while. But I got really interested in why do some things work for some people and some, and it really started with my career because I am a hand raiser. And so it was great in a startup because I was able to do this and that and this and that. And that was fantastic. And then the last part of my 13-year career at this Fortune 500 company, I raised my hand for something and it was miserable. Miserable. And my boss was unhappy with me. I was unhappy. I was trying to protect my team, like just all bad things. And when I left, when I was asked to leave, I started really thinking about like what happened there. I'm a good worker. I have a good work ethic. That didn't change. My love of the company didn't change. My love of the people didn't change. What happened that was so disastrous? And I found a company called DNA Behavior, and they had a behavioral assessment tool. And as soon as I took it, I was like, oh, I see exactly what happened. In fact, I see exactly what happened for my whole career. I can go back and map my whole career of the times that things went really well for me and the times that things didn't go so well for me. It's like, people need to know this. Yeah. And I want to help people understand this because then, and I know now which things not to raise my hand for. Like I get very enthusiastic and I'll raise my hand for stuff, but now I know, someone came to me the other day and asked me for something. I said, it sounds like it might be heavy on this. Is that true? Because if it's true, I'm probably not going to be great at that. I'll be enthusiastic for you, but I'm probably not going to be great at that. And so I was able to have that conversation and say how much project management is actually involved in this, because that's not where I shine. I've done it. I can do it well, but it requires a lot of energy from me.
Sure. That's interesting. So one way I'd like to take that just on the outset is the difference you saw between your startup and the Fortune 500 company. it's been my experience, it's a lot easier to see things that are going wrong in a startup. Things are easily hidden in a Fortune 500. So what did you see? Is that kind of along the same lines?
100%. Because, and that's what makes hiring well at a small company so important.
Right.
Because if you've got somebody that's not doing the thing that they're supposed to do, either you need to shift them pretty quickly. You need to either set better expectations for them, and I find that owners sometimes have difficulty setting clear expectations, or you need to shift them to something that's going to be a better fit for, there's plenty to do in a small company. So
right.
Shift them to something that's going to be a better fit. And if you don't understand what that is, most people don't see these behavior patterns because we're not taught these patterns, so they don't know what to look for.
Sure.
So I can help you understand what to look for, so that and align that with your job description, align that with the way you ask interview questions, set up a process to ask better questions so that you get better people. You're right. In a big company, the problems aren't actually different. The expectations are just as unclear in a big company, but the momentum of the big company kind of just allows things to continue.
Right.
Because I've heard from leaders in big companies as well, I don't know what my job description should be. Or you get hired at a big company and then you work there for 13 years. No one gives you a new job description when you get promoted.
Right.
Nobody gives you a new job description when this project is over. And so roles get really muddy in those environments. And I find that some people step up and figure out their role and push for a new place. And some people just kind of hide in what they used to do or what they have been doing.
Right. I was going to ask you one question, but then the ending actually made me think of something else. What is your thought on quiet quitting? I know that was like a super hot topic that we were all talking about for a while, and I think it's still very much in existence. I think it's still very much happening. Again, I feel like it's easier to do that in a larger company. I have thought about it, but I want to hear yours first.
I don't think it's new.
Ooh, okay. Valid point. Yes.
I think it's getting more attention, but I don't think it's actually new. I think that has happened. What I think is new is that with the pandemic, a lot of people spent a lot of time thinking about their job and how much time they were spending at it and how much extracurricular they were doing and so I do think that then coming out of pandemic, whatever that even means,
right.
People are looking for those opportunities to be their best. And if they don't see them, then they're just shutting that part down, closing that part down a little bit at work so that they can go be who they are wherever else they are. If they don't feel like they can be seen and appreciated for who they are at work, and they don't have clear direction, and they don't really understand or believe in what the mission is, I see that, well, then I'll just show up and do my thing. I don't need to get promoted. I'll just show up and do my thing until I can, until it's time for me to be off and I can go do something else.
Well, and I think that's a key phrase there is if you don't want to get promoted, right? Because that was kind of my thought. And Brandon Smith, the workplace therapist who I mentioned, we're definitely going to get you connected with. I think there's a lot of synergy, and I'd quite frankly love to hear that conversation between the two of you. But Brandon responded just beautifully to this article that was put out on quiet quitting, and he was like, I'm paraphrasing here, but he was essentially like, if you're not looking to get promoted, right? Quiet quitters, if you're just doing the bare minimum at your job, because that was kind of the whole thing, is that it wasn't that they were not doing their job. They're doing their job and they're doing it well, but they're just doing what they need to do. Where if you're truly looking for that promotion or to move up, that requires you to do a little bit extra. I mean, it's the go-getters, for lack of a better term, that get the promotion. So I thought that was interesting as well. What's the number one challenge that you currently see just with some of us are back to work. We've got like a hybrid thing going on. There's still a lot of virtual work happening. What do you see as just the biggest challenge leaders face?
I think particularly with small business owners and entrepreneurs, they have a vision for the thing that they're trying to build. And usually they didn't get into business to run a team.
Right. Yes.
That is a consequence of their growth.
Right.
But that's not usually what they're passionate about.
Right.
right? Most entrepreneurs and small business owners don't think, I want to be an awesome leader of people. And oh, by the way, here's a business that I can do that in.
Right.
It's usually the reverse. Here's a business that I'm really passionate about. And then, oh, this is going to require me to hire some people. And so I think the biggest problem they have is expressing what those expectations and needs are, particularly if they've grown from solopreneur or a very small team, because they're in the habit of doing everything. And so they have to shift mindset to being more of a delegator than a doer. And they have to have a clear way to express expectations and set accountability. So when I talk to business owners that say, I've hired all these people and I'm still working an 18-hour day, should I just they must be the wrong people. Should I just fire them all? Usually it's not the case that they're all the wrong people.
Right.
It's usually the case that they haven't let go of enough control of things, or they haven't set clear enough expectations. And I don't know that that's unique to small business and entrepreneurs. I think that that's probably true in larger organizations as well.
Sure.
Is what is the expectation, and what does it? And people have a hard time answering that question. Even in my corporate career, when I would say, "What's it going to take for me to get exceeds expectation at my next review?" Blank face from my leader. I'll just know when you do it. Well, what do I do? There's nothing tangible that I can do to make that happen. And so we don't do a good enough job of setting expectations. We have a feeling of you're doing well or you're not doing well. And there's sometimes a mismatch between how the leader feels about that and how the employee feels about that. And if there's not some sort of expressed criteria for what does doing well mean, I think that's where a lot of people problems come to organizations, small or large.
Yeah. That's where I love doing this, number one, to interview others, talk with them, and bring out these resources to listeners. But I love outsource this. Bring in someone who is an expert, right? It's very much the same with our business. My clients can 100% do their social media, but they don't have the time to do it. Nor are they interested in keeping up with everything that changes, what feels like every 5 seconds, right? What does the algorithm want today? Same thing with taxes. Could I do my taxes? That's probably arguable, but I shouldn't do them. And as a small business owner, or to that Fortune 500 CEO, no, actually you're not supposed to do all the things. Why do you think we struggle with that? Why do we struggle with just letting some things go?
I think because we tie some of our identity to how hard we work. I think that we get taught from a very early age, work hard. And if you attach your identity to how hard you work, then hiring somebody to do your taxes and your social media feels like a luxury and feels like you're not actually working hard anymore.
Yeah.
Because if you just took 20 hours a week off my plate, then what am I supposed to do with that time?
Sure.
So maybe I'm not working as hard. So maybe I don't deserve as much of what I have. And so I think part of it is, so I think that's part of it. I think the other part of it is a sense of control. If I'm not in all of the things because I've made the business successful to this point, because I was in everything. And if I'm not in all of the things, and I think this is micromanagers that happen everywhere. If I'm not in all of the things, how can I know that the things are being done well, or being done correctly, or being done the way I want them done? And so it's being comfortable with a sense of a little bit of loss of control and being clear about what success actually looks like. And then I think letting go of this sense that if I'm not busy every second of the day, then I'm not working hard. And if I don't work hard, I can't achieve the results that I want.
Yeah, that's good. So I want to dive into how the behavior aspect plays into that. So what does this even mean? The behavior, is it something that we're looking for in who we hire? It's how we see people interact in teams. What do you mean when we're looking at the behavior side of the workplace?
So it's all of that.
Okay.
We have kind of built into us from the time we're about 3 to 6 years old, a natural behavior pattern. We can change this pattern, we can flex this pattern, but that pattern is baked in. Right? My pattern is I tend to be high take charge, so I like to make decisions. I'm pretty straightforward about the way I say things. Yeah. I'm pretty self-reliant. I'm very high spontaneous, so I'm very instinctual. I go with my gut. I don't love a lot of planning. The opposite of that is high planned. accurate, precise, sounds like project manager, right? I'm kind of the opposite of that, and that's really strong in my behavioral pattern, and I'm high creative. So I like to do things in an original way. I will drive a different way to work, or I will, try a different way of doing things. If you ask me to solve a problem, I will get my blank piece of paper out and start solving that problem. People high anchored, the opposite of creative, will go look for a template. Who's done this before? There's no problem that hasn't been solved. Who's solved this problem? What's the best way to do it? What's a practical way to do it? It doesn't even occur to me till I'm 90% through on my blank piece of paper that someone's probably maybe I've even already solved this. Oh, this looks really familiar. Maybe I have already done this before. And so understanding that pattern, right? The last role that I had in my organization was an operations role, technical operations. For technical operations, you want somebody high planned and high anchored because you're doing the same thing over and over again to like milliseconds of precision.
Sure. That's interesting.
And I'm really opposite of that pattern. Once I saw the pattern, I was like, well, this is why things went so wrong in that role, because what they were expecting of me, I had to flex to my strongest behavioral traits. I had to flex so far that when I did something that I got credit for, the bar would get raised. It was like, finally, you've met the minimum requirement, now do this. For me, it took every ounce of my being to even get what they considered a minimum requirement. We didn't have this conversation, and I didn't understand it at the time, but helping people see these patterns. Do you have somebody like me doing project management? Probably not. I did it, and I did it well. I was exhausted all the time when I did it, though. So I would go home and like plop on the couch and could do nothing else for the rest of the day. When I got promoted to manage project managers, that was like nirvana for me because they were in the weeds and I was handling exceptions. I'm great at handling exceptions. I'm great at figuring out the pattern in things, and when people dump everything out and say, I don't know what to do with this, I can find the through thread, I can get them back on track, I can figure out the way around it. So it's not that I can't be in the project management profession, it's just that I shouldn't be the one managing the details. So I think once you have this language of behavioral patterns, right, there are other patterns too, once you have this language of these patterns, then you can see, okay, well, I want to write a job description that's going to attract somebody. In this role, I need somebody that's precise and accurate, that is going to put a process in place and stick to the process. It's somebody that's going to help me stick to a process. So when I'm looking to hire somebody, I'm looking for somebody slightly opposite of me to put some structure into place.
Yeah.
And then I have that discussion with them. When you need more from me, I'm not going to volunteer it. Don't wait on me to give you more details, because they're not coming, because that's not how my brain is wired. But sure. I will sit down with you and give you those details if you need them. So it's giving owners and leaders a language, and teams a language to say, this is what I'm great at, and here's how you get the best out of me. And if I'm going to work with somebody that's kind of opposite to me, what's the agreement that we're going to have about how we're going to work together so we don't drive each other crazy?
Yeah. That's super interesting. Can you share like a red flag where maybe we look at a team member and we can see perhaps they're not sitting in the right seat?
I think if people are consistently exhausted, and they can express that in a role that is not a heavy physical labor kind of role, I think depending on, it kind of depends on the role. I mean, certainly there are red flags for me, a red flag would have been for my project management. When you looked at my project plan, you could see that it had nowhere near the amount of detail and wasn't groomed like someone who's high planned would do it. In an interview, for example, if you were hiring me to do event planning, don't hire me to do event planning, and you ask me, Nikki, how would you plan an event? Just walk me through your process to plan an event. I would probably just start answering you and say, well, I'd find out how many people, and then I'd find a space here, and I would, find a good caterer, and I would. Now, right there, that's a red flag, right? Because someone high planned, when you interview them and you say, Whitney, tell me how you would plan an event. So somebody high planned is going to say, what kind of event, for how many people, what's the theme of the event, they're going to have a million questions because there's no way they can start planning an event without having all these questions answered.
Yeah.
So just in that interview, with me kind of winging it and saying, well, I would do this, and then I would do this, and then I would do this, and then hearing somebody else answer that question with a barrage of 50 questions that they have to have answered before they can even start the first step of planning, that should be a red flag then that, like, my answer sounded fine. I said some of the right things, but it was nowhere near as detail-oriented and nowhere near as thoughtful as somebody who naturally is high-planned, who will ask all those questions. So that's a way to start, thinking about how is that work being done. So for a project manager, you want somebody who knows all those details and who wants all of that precision. If you just start, now, if you're really experienced as a project manager and this is a project you've done a whole bunch of times, then that answer might look to them like, well, in the past when I've planned this, I've had this type of information, so it might not be a series of questions. It might be, in the past when I've done that, I've gathered this information and put together this type of event, and here's how I did it. So it could be an example like that without questions, but clearly you can see, here are all the steps that I did to make this happen in a way that you wouldn't have heard the same precise methodology from me.
So is this almost like an assessment that you would have leaders take and then each of their employees take? Is that how that would usually work?
Yeah, it takes like 10 minutes to take, so it's not super extensive. And then everybody gets their report. Usually when I'm working with leaders and teams, everybody gets their report, and then depending on what we're trying to do, I can debrief each person individually, and then usually there's a team event that happens around it, so we can look at, do you have gaps on your team? Is everybody like this, but nobody is like this? Is that working for you? Is that okay? Because sometimes it's okay. And sometimes you need a balance of these different things. What I find is that if you've got one person that's an extreme over here and the rest of the team tends to be over here, the issue is that as human beings, we are storytelling machines, right? So we tell stories to ourselves and about each other to make sense of our world. And we're not really wired for generous stories, right? It wasn't of evolutional benefit to me to tell a nice story about the tiger in the grass over there, because the ones that did that are not here today.
Right.
And so I tell the same kind of stories, though, about behavioral patterns that are different than mine, because my pattern is so ingrained in me that it doesn't occur to me to go to look for a template. That the story that I can tell is, or the story of someone highly planned talking about me, right, is, I don't know why Nikki wants me to fail, right? She keeps giving me an outline. I keep asking her for a plan. I keep getting an outline. She won't give me her plan. Meanwhile, I'm in my office high-fiving myself because something's written down on paper, right? So I don't understand why we have a problem, but you're fuming because I refuse to give you the kind of detail that you need to get.
Yeah.
And so it's that once I can see that, then I can understand, oh, I'm probably making you crazy all the time. So what can I do to slow myself down, to summarize what I think we're agreeing to have you interview me, to get more detail? Because it's not going to spontaneously come out of me, but if you need that detail and you can tell me which details you need, then I can help you get that detail. My brain isn't wired like that. I kind of go from A to Z without a lot of steps in between, and my high planned people like to hit every single step to make sure that it's all right and it's all perfect. On the flip side, if you're stuck because you're analyzing what is perfect, this is the plan, and it's not 100% working, I can step in and say, this is what good enough looks like, and this is what you need to do to just keep us moving forward. Because you can't see that because you're in the details of perfection, and I can see this is really close enough.
Yeah. So two more questions for you. Because as you were talking and going through the assessment, I suspect that probably a big piece of resistance is the time it takes to turn the ship, right? Because depending on how big that vessel is, if you're looking at a startup, okay, you can probably change the direction a little bit quicker. If you've got a Fortune 500 company, like that is a cruise liner, and it's going to take a minute, right, if you're going north to turn that ship around and go south. So how long does the process usually take if you've got folks sitting in the wrong seat and you're like, okay, you got a lot of people over here, we need to move some over here, and then there's gaps that we need to hire?
So I think it kind of depends on how committed are you to making these changes. How committed are you to stopping those quiet quitters and putting them in a place that really makes them light up about the job that they're doing because they're using their gifts, right? I think that might be another place where I'm quiet quitting because I don't get to do any of the things that I'm actually great at here. Like, I'm good enough at these things, so I'll do these things because they're getting the job done, but it's not using my gifts. So one, it's how committed are you to helping people use their gifts and recognizing that and telling more generous stories to and about each other at work. And I think part of the misconception of behavioral change is that it has to be really hard and arduous. If you can help your leaders, to recognize, here are the 5 things that are strengths for this person, and here's how you can set up an environment to get the best out of this person. And you commit to spending a couple of hours to put a plan together for how does our job, the job that you're already doing, link to the things that you're already good at. And then what are special projects or other things that we have going on in the organization that I might be able to link you to. Even just set up a pool that says, hey, if you need brainstorming, put Nikki in that pool. Even if she's not in your department, put her in that pool to tap on her because she loves doing that and it's easy for her. Versus my highly reserved, highly anchored teammate who's in that department who hates those events, who struggles a little bit to come up with new ideas and who overanalyzes everything to make sure that it's perfect and that it's right before they're even willing to share an idea. Relieve them of that duty and put somebody like me in the place to just do some of the brainstorming, but then relieve me of the duty of actually putting that action into place. Have that person who's great at taking ideas and operationalizing them, figure out where your handoffs can be.
Yeah.
You're right, reorgs take a while if you're going to reorg the whole organization. Like I said, in small organizations, people are usually wearing a whole bunch of hats. So figuring out which hats fit best can help speed that up, and figuring out which hats you need next can help speed that up. And then documenting some of those things so that as people move around or move up in an organization, that you have the core of, this is what made you great at this, so this is what we need to look for again.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that. And I would argue it's one of those things, well, we don't, can't afford the time to do this. Can't afford not to do it. I love that. Last question is the question I ask all my guests. Nikki, what does being a city on a hill mean to you?
I think it means really understanding what drives you. What are those patterns that drive you? Because our behavioral patterns then also drive our thoughts, also drive our emotions, also drive everything that we do. So when you have a language or when you understand what those patterns are for you, and then owning those patterns, and because they're all strengths. Overplayed, they become maybe a weakness, but they're all strengths. And so I think it's being authentically you, owning those strengths, being able to share what those strengths are with other people, and then to really be a city on a hill, appreciating those strengths in other people that you don't have, appreciating how you can flex to meet somebody where they are, appreciating that you being authentically you is a magnet for some people, and you can also, be that magnet for others. And so finding and telling generous stories because you're authentically confident in who you are. These behavioral patterns don't change. They're baked in when we're little, and they don't change.
Accept them.
So work with them instead of against them all the time.
That's great.
And I think just recognizing that things that come easily to you are superpowers to other people. They don't feel like gifts to you because that's just how you think. It's just how you show up. It's just who you are. People who have opposite talents, though, see those as gifts and are envious of them.
Yeah.
So share them.
Yeah, that's wonderful. If we have listeners that want to get in contact with you because everyone's like, ooh, I need Nikki's help, how do they reach you?
So you can email me at info@ridgelinecoaching.com, or you can link with me on LinkedIn. I think it's Ridgeline Nikki Evans is my LinkedIn. You have to click an extra. It's easy to follow. You have to click an extra button to connect with me because of the LinkedIn settings. But do that. Tell me that you saw me here, and I'm happy to connect with you.
Awesome. Perfect. Nikki, thank you so much for coming on the
Thank you. I've had so much fun.
Absolutely. Thank you. And to our listeners, thank you. We will see you again later this week.